The sound that shattered my world wasn't a gunshot or a car crash. It was my husband's smug voice seeping through a cracked door, uttering my mother's name and sealing my family's fate. The sound that shattered my world wasn't a gunshot or a car crash. It was the low, smug tone of my husband's voice, seeping through the crack of the study door. I had just put our 4-year-old daughter, Maya, down for her nap and was tiptoeing past, on my way to check on our 7-year-old son, Leo, who was supposed to be doing his homework. Mark was on the phone, and I automatically slowed my steps, not wanting to disturb him. He worked from home, and I knew how important his calls were. But then I heard him say my mother's name, and a cold tendril of dread snaked its way up my spine. I pressed my ear gently against the cool wood of the door, a decision I would both regret and be thankful for the rest of my life. "No, Carol, you don't understand," Mark was saying, his voice dripping with a kind of arrogant satisfaction I hadn't heard since he'd closed his first big deal years ago. "It's done. It's for the best. My mother has been saying it for years, and she's finally made me see the light." There was a pause. I could imagine my mom on the other end, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. She'd always been my biggest supporter, my rock, and she'd always tried so hard to like Mark, even when his flaws started showing through the shiny veneer he presented to the world. He was her son-in-law, the father of her grandchildren, and she was fiercely loyal. "What do you mean, see the light, Mark?" I could almost hear her question in the silence. Mark let out a short, dismissive laugh. It was a sound that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. It was the same laugh his mother, Brenda, used right before she was about to say something particularly cruel. "The light, Carol," he repeated, as if speaking to a child. "The light that Sarah and those kids have been a dead weight on me, a drain on my finances, a drain on my potential. Brenda. My mother has been watching this whole thing unfold, and she's right. She's always right." My breath caught in my throat. "Those kids?" He didn't say our kids. He didn't say Leo and Maya. He said those kids, like they were strangers, like they were pests he'd just had exterminated. I strained to hear my mom's reply, but Mark's voice boomed again, overriding whatever she was trying to say. This time, it was laced with a triumphant, pompous cruelty that turned my blood to ice. "Look, it's over. I came home, I packed their bags, and I kicked her and the kids out onto the street. My mother hates them. She hates the way Sarah raised them. She hates the noise. She hates everything. And you know what? I'm starting to hate them too. It's a relief, honestly. A fresh start." The world tilted on its axis. I pressed my back against the wall, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a sob. Packed their bags? Kicked us out? It didn't make any sense. I was standing right here, in our home. Maya was sleeping in her bed down the hall. Leo was in his room, probably drawing superheroes instead of doing his math worksheets. Our bags weren't packed. We weren't on the street. Was this some kind of sick, twisted joke? A power play he was performing for my mother? My mind raced, trying to piece it together. We'd had a fight the night before, a bad one. It had started, as it always did, with his mother. We had just come back from Sunday dinner at Brenda's, an ordeal I dreaded every single week. She had spent the entire meal making passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, my clothes, and my lack of discipline with the children. When Leo accidentally spilled a little water on her pristine white tablecloth, she had snatched the napkin out of his hand and hissed, "Honestly, Sarah, can't you teach him basic table manners? Or is that beyond you as well?" Mark hadn't said a word. He just sat there, staring at his plate, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The silence was his endorsement of her cruelty. Later that night, when the kids were in bed, I had confronted him. "Why don't you ever stand up for me? For your own son?" I had pleaded, my voice thick with unshed tears. "She's my mother, Sarah," he'd replied coldly, parroting the line he always used. "She's just from a different generation. She means well." "She doesn't mean well, Mark. She's cruel, and you let her be cruel to us," I'd shouted, the frustration of years boiling over. The argument had escalated from there, ending with him sleeping in the guest room. But it was just a fight. We'd had fights before. It wasn't a marriage-ending event, or so I had thought. Now, listening to him on the phone, I realized that fight wasn't the cause. It was the excuse. It was the final domino Brenda had been waiting to push. The fresh start he was talking about. It was real. He meant it. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My entire body was trembling. I had to see. I had to know if he was lying, if this was just a bluff. Moving with a stealth I didn't know I possessed, I crept down the hallway past Maya's room and pushed open the door to our master bedroom. The sight that greeted me stole the air from my lungs. The closet door was wide open. My side was completely empty. My dresses, my shirts, my jeans, all gone. The top of my dresser, usually cluttered with my perfume, jewelry box, and a framed photo of me and the kids, was bare. It was wiped clean, as if I had never existed. My gaze darted to the corner of the room, and there they were. 3 suitcases and 2 children's backpacks, neatly lined up by the door. A cheap black rolling suitcase I hadn't seen before was stuffed with my clothes, haphazardly folded. Leo's Spider-Man backpack and Maya's sparkly unicorn one were bulging, a stuffed animal ear poking out of one of the zippers. He had actually done it. While I was putting our daughter to sleep, he had erased me from our room. He had packed our lives into a few bags and was now calmly on the phone, announcing our eviction to my own mother like he'd just won the lottery. A wave of nausea washed over me, hot and acidic. I stumbled back out into the hallway, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. Where were we supposed to go? What was I supposed to tell the children? As I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to think, the muffled conversation from the study ended. I heard the click of the phone being placed back in its cradle. A heavy silence filled the house, a silence that felt more menacing than the shouting. I was paralyzed, caught between the study door and the bedroom that was no longer mine. Then I heard the squeak of his office chair, followed by the soft thud of his expensive leather shoes on the hardwood floor. Footsteps, coming towards the door. My heart leaped into my throat. He was coming out. He knew I was out here. He must have known. This whole performance was for me, too. The slow, deliberate footsteps grew louder, closer. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tensed for a confrontation I wasn't ready for. The brass doorknob began to turn. The door swung open, not with a crash, but with a smooth, silent motion that was somehow more terrifying. Mark stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling it completely. He wasn't surprised to see me. There was no flicker of shock in his cool blue eyes, no guilty start. Instead, he looked at me with a calm, appraising expression. As if I were a subordinate, he was about to fire. His tie was perfectly straight, his shirt crisp. He looked utterly, unnervingly normal. "Ah, Sarah," he said, and his voice was the same one he used on his conference calls level, controlled and devoid of any real warmth. "Good, you heard. That saves me the trouble of a lengthy and frankly tedious explanation." He stepped out of the study, gently closing the door behind him as if sealing off that part of his life, and walked past me toward the kitchen. He didn't even brush against me. It was like I was already a ghost in my own home. I found my voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. "Mark, what are you talking about? What was that on the phone? The bag's in our room. This is a joke, right? A sick, horrible joke?" I followed him, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor, a frantic litany of questions bubbling up inside me. He ignored them all. He opened the sleek stainless steel refrigerator, the one I'd spent weeks picking out, and took out a bottle of sparkling water. The casualness of the act was a slap in the face. "It's not a joke, Sarah," he said, twisting the cap off with a sharp hiss. He didn't turn to look at me. He just stood there, his back to me, staring out the kitchen window at the manicured lawn he was so proud of. It's a course correction, a business decision, if you will. My mother and I were going over the numbers last night after you had your little tantrum. He took a long, slow sip of his water. She helped me see things with perfect clarity. You and the children are a liability, a significant recurring expense with diminishing returns. You've made me complacent, soft. You're holding me back. The words hit me like physical blows. Liability, expense, diminishing returns. He was talking about his family, about our life together, as if it were a failing stock. Holding you back? I choked out, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I gave up my career for you, Mark, so you could build yours. I raise your children. I run this house so you don't have to think about anything but your precious work. Exactly, he said, finally turning around. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. That smug, self-satisfied look was back on his face. You did your job, and now that role is redundant. My career has reached a point where I need to be agile, unencumbered. Brenda has plans for me, for us, and they don't include you. Us. He meant him and his mother. It was always him and his mother. I was just the temporary incubator and nanny. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unstoppable. So that's it. You're just throwing us away because your mother snapped her fingers. What about Leo? What about Maya? They're your children, Mark. They adore you. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. It wasn't remorse. It was annoyance. Don't be so melodramatic, Sarah. It's unbecoming, he said with a sigh. They're children. They're resilient. They'll get over it. And you're a capable woman. You'll figure something out. He pushed himself off the counter and walked over to the small table by the kitchen door where we kept the mail. He picked up a thin white envelope and held it out to me. I'm not a monster. I've left you $500 in cash. Consider it a severance package for your years of service. I stared at the envelope, then back at his impassive face. $500. For 10 years of my life. For 2 children. It was such a profound insult, so deeply cruel, that it momentarily silenced my grief and ignited a pure, white-hot fury. You can't do this, I said, my voice dangerously low. The house is in both our names, our savings. I'll fight you. Mark actually laughed. It was that same short, dismissive laugh I'd heard through the door. Oh, Sarah, you're so naive. You really should have paid more attention to the paperwork you signed over the years. As for the savings, he said, his smile widening into a predatory grin, I took the liberty of protecting my assets this morning. The joint accounts have been drained, consolidated into a new account, an account that, I assure you, you have no access to. My knees felt weak. He had planned this, every last detail. This wasn't a snap decision made after a fight. This was a calculated, premeditated strike, executed with the precision of a corporate takeover. He had been waiting for the right moment, and our fight last night had been his green light. I was penniless, homeless, with 2 small children. A wave of dizziness threatened to pull me under. My gaze flickered to the clock on the oven. 1:15 p.m. Maya would be waking up from her nap soon. Leo would be wondering where his afternoon snack was. They had no idea that their father was standing here, calmly dismantling their entire world. You have 1 hour, he said, his voice dropping the pretense of civility and taking on the sharp edge of a command. A car service will be here at 2:15 to take you and your things wherever you decide to go. I suggest you call your mother. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to hear from you. He tossed the envelope of cash onto the counter. It landed with a soft, pathetic flutter. I stood there, frozen, my mind screaming. 1 hour, 60 minutes to pack up a life, to figure out how to explain this to my children, to find somewhere, anywhere to go. It was impossible. It was a nightmare. And then he delivered the final devastating blow. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "And please," he said, turning to give me one last cold look, "do try to be quick about it. My mother is on her way over now. She's so excited to help me redecorate. She has the most wonderful ideas for turning the kids' rooms into a home gym and a proper cigar lounge for when I have clients over. She wants to be here to personally see your things out onto the curb." The words cigar lounge echoed in the sterile silence of the kitchen, each syllable a hammer blow against my already fractured reality. Leo's room, his sanctuary filled with hand-drawn pictures of superheroes and carefully constructed Lego cities, was going to be a cigar lounge. Maya's room, with its soft pink walls and the glowing star decals I'd painstakingly placed on the ceiling, would become a home gym. It wasn't just about kicking us out. It was about erasing us. It was about Brenda, his mother, marching in to scrub away every trace of our existence and rebuild the home in her own image, with her son as the centerpiece. A primal scream built in my chest, a roar of a mother protecting her young, but it caught in my throat, strangled by a sudden, icy calm. Hysteria wouldn't help me. Crying wouldn't change this. Mark had built a fortress of legal and financial maneuvering around himself. He was insulated, protected. He had anticipated my every move. He expected me to fall apart, to beg, to become the pathetic, melodramatic woman he'd just accused me of being. I would not give him the satisfaction. My eyes fell on the envelope on the counter. $500, severance pay. The sheer audacity of it was almost comical. Without a word, I walked over, picked it up, and looked Mark dead in the eye. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "You will regret this, Mark. Not today, not tomorrow, but you will. There will come a day when you are old and alone, and you will remember this moment. You will remember what you threw away for her." He just shrugged, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. "I doubt it. Now, the clock is ticking, Sarah. 60 minutes. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps echoing down the hall towards his study. I heard the door click shut. He was sealing himself away again, leaving me to clean up the mess of the lives he had just detonated. For a moment, I just stood there, the envelope clutched in my hand, my mind a frantic blank. Then, the training of a decade of motherhood kicked in. I had a deadline. I had a mission. Protect the children. That was all that mattered. I shoved the envelope into the pocket of my jeans and ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. The first thing I saw was the neat line of suitcases. It felt like a violation seeing our personal belongings packed by his cold, indifferent hands. I ripped open Leo's Spider-Man backpack. Inside was a chaotic jumble, a few t-shirts, his favorite pair of pajamas, his toothbrush, and his treasured, slightly worn-out copy of Where the Wild Things Are. But his sketchbook was missing, and so was his beloved stuffed wolf, Lobo, the one he couldn't sleep without. Mark hadn't packed the things that mattered. He'd packed the necessities, the inventory, not the treasures. I raced into Leo's room. He was sitting at his small desk, headphones on, humming to himself as he scribbled furiously on a piece of paper. He hadn't heard a thing. My heart broke all over again. He looked up as I entered, a wide, innocent smile on his face. "Mom, look, I finished Captain America." He held up the drawing, a proud, vibrant creation. I forced a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "Oh, honey, that's amazing. That's the best one yet." I knelt beside him, my hand resting on his small shoulder. How do you tell a 7-year-old that his whole world is about to be ripped apart? "Hey, buddy," I began, my voice thick. "We're going to go on a little adventure. A surprise trip to see Grandma Carol." His eyes lit up. "Really? For how long? Can I bring my Lego Star Destroyer?" "Yes, you can bring it," I said, fighting to keep my voice from breaking. "We have to pack super fast, though. It's a game. Can you help me?" I pulled out his larger school backpack from the closet and started stuffing it with everything I could think of. His sketchbook, his colored pencils, Lobo, the picture of the four of us from our last beach trip that sat on his nightstand. I grabbed clothes from his drawers, not caring if they matched, just grabbing everything I could. All the while, I kept up a cheerful, breathless chatter about how much fun we were going to have at Grandma's. Leo, caught up in the excitement, happily helped, oblivious to the tears silently streaming down my cheeks. Next was Maya. She was stirring in her room, her sleepy baby sounds a balm to my raw nerves. I scooped her up from her crib, burying my face in her soft, warm hair, inhaling the sweet scent of her. She blinked up at me, her big brown eyes still fuzzy with sleep. I packed her unicorn bag with diapers, wipes, her favorite sippy cup, and her Goodnight Moon board book. I grabbed the baby blanket my mother had knitted for her, the one Mark's mother had once called tacky. I wrapped Maya in it like a shield. With the kids' most important things secured, I turned my attention back to the bedroom. I ignored the suitcase Mark had packed for me and grabbed a duffel bag from the top of the closet he'd overlooked. I threw in my laptop, my phone charger, and the manila folder from my nightstand drawer that contained all of our important documents, birth certificates, passports, social security cards. Thank God I'd always been the one to handle the family paperwork. Then I went to my jewelry box, the one Mark had dismissed as holding cheap costume junk. My grandmother's locket, my mother's pearl earrings, a few other sentimental pieces, they all went into a small pouch and into my pocket. These were the things with real value, the things that tied me to my past and my own family. The minutes were flying by. A glance at the clock told me I had less than 20 minutes left. Brenda would be here soon. The thought of that woman gloating over me, watching me drag my children out of their home, filled me with a fresh surge of adrenaline. I would not give her that satisfaction. We would be gone before she arrived. I shepherded the kids downstairs, my arms loaded with bags, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Okay, my little adventurers," I said, trying to sound breezy. "Shoes on! The magic taxi will be here any second." Maya giggled and Leo ran to the door, excited. I was pulling on my sneakers when I suddenly froze. My keys, my wallet. They were in my purse, which I'd left on the hook by the study door. My stomach plummeted. I had to go back. I had to walk past that door one more time. I told Leo to help Maya with her shoes and crept back down the silent hallway. As I reached for my purse, I heard voices from inside the study. Mark was on the phone again, but this time, the voice on the other end wasn't my mother's. It was a woman's voice, light and musical, punctuated by laughter. "I know, baby," Mark was saying, his tone syrupy and sweet, a tone he hadn't used with me in years. "Yes, she's almost gone. It's all taken care of. No, don't worry about the kids. They won't be a problem anymore. We'll be completely free. Just you and me. Brenda's on her way to help me with the purge, and then tonight is all ours." A whole new dimension of betrayal opened up beneath me. It wasn't just his mother. There was someone else. Another woman. I felt the floor give way. My hand, trembling, closed around the strap of my purse. As I pulled it off the hook, it knocked against the wall with a soft thud. Inside the study, the conversation stopped abruptly. A dead silence fell. Then I heard Mark's chair scrape against the floor. He'd heard me. He knew I was standing right outside his door again, and this time, he knew exactly what I had just overheard. The click of the phone hanging up was a gunshot in the silent hallway. My blood ran cold. He was coming out, but this time, it wouldn't be a calm, calculated dismissal. This time, I had overheard the final, sordid piece of his betrayal, and the smug mask of the untouchable businessman was about to drop. I didn't wait for the doorknob to turn. Clutching my purse, I spun around and bolted for the front door, my heart hammering a desperate tattoo against my ribs. "Mom, what's wrong?" Leo asked, his face a small, worried knot. He could feel the panic radiating off me. "Nothing, sweetie. The magic taxi is just coming a little early. We have to hurry." My voice was a high, tight wire of false cheer. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers clumsy and slick with sweat. Behind me, I heard the study door fly open, crashing against the interior wall. Sarah! Mark's voice was a guttural roar, stripped of all its earlier composure. It was the voice of a cornered animal. I didn't look back. I wrenched the front door open, shoved the kids' backpacks into their arms, and pushed them gently out onto the porch. Go to the sidewalk, babies. Go now and wait for Mommy. I turned to grab our remaining bags just as Mark rounded the corner into the foyer. His face was a thunderous mask of fury. His eyes, which had been so cold and controlled moments before, were now blazing with a terrifying rage. He saw the bags, saw the open door, and realized I was seconds from escaping the stage he had so carefully set. "You think you can just walk out of here?" he snarled, advancing on me. "After eavesdropping on my private conversations." "Your private conversations?" I shot back, my fear momentarily eclipsed by a wave of righteous anger. "You mean the ones where you plot to throw your family onto the street and install your mistress in a house I helped pay for?" The mention of the other woman made him lunge. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep like claws. "You will not speak of things you don't understand. Now get back inside. We're going to wait for my mother as planned." He started to drag me back from the doorway. A primal fear, raw and visceral, surged through me. He was stronger than me. He could physically force me to stay. He could make me endure the humiliation of his mother's arrival. He could trap me here, stage the perfect, pathetic scene of my eviction for Brenda's viewing pleasure. My kids were on the sidewalk, watching with wide, terrified eyes. I couldn't let them see this. I couldn't let him win. "Let go of me, Mark," I screamed, twisting in his grip. With my free hand, I grabbed the heavy, decorative ceramic vase from the entryway table, a wedding gift from my parents, and swung it with all my might against his arm. It connected with a sickening crack, and the vase shattered, sending shards flying across the floor. Mark roared in pain and surprise, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all the time I needed. I wrenched my arm free, grabbed the last 2 bags, and scrambled out the door, slamming it shut behind me. I didn't wait to see what he would do. I ran down the porch steps, my lungs burning, and scooped a crying Maya into my arms. I grabbed Leo's hand, his small fingers clutching mine in a death grip. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," I gasped, more to myself than to them. "We're okay." We reached the sidewalk just as a sleek, black town car pulled up to the curb. My first thought was that it was the car service Mark had ordered. My stomach twisted. He was going to watch us get into the car he had so magnanimously provided. But the driver's side door opened, and it wasn't a stranger who stepped out. It was my brother, David. He took one look at my tear-streaked face, the crying children, the bags piled on the grass, and his expression hardened. "Carol called me," he said, his voice grim. "She said Mark was spouting some crazy nonsense. I didn't believe her." He strode towards me, his eyes fixed on the front door of the house, which was now being pulled open. Mark stood there, clutching his arm, his face contorted in a mask of pure hatred. "Get off my property, David," Mark spat. "This is a private family matter." "You lost the right to call Sarah your family about an hour ago, you piece of garbage," David shot back, stepping in front of me and the kids like a human shield. "Get back in your house before I do something we both regret." Mark hesitated, his eyes flicking between my brother's clenched fists and my face. He knew David. He knew David wasn't a man who made idle threats. With one last venomous glare in my direction, Mark retreated back into the house, slamming the door with a final echoing boom. David turned to me, his face softening instantly. "Come on, Sarah, let's get you out of here." He quickly loaded our bags into the trunk while I buckled the sobbing kids into their car seats. As I slid into the passenger seat, my entire body started to shake uncontrollably, the adrenaline finally giving way to the crushing weight of reality. We pulled away from the curb, and I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see the house, the perfect lawn, the life I had poured my soul into, for one last time. We drove in silence for a few minutes, The only sound, the soft sniffles of the children in the back. David reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mom's getting a room ready for you. We'll figure this out, Sarah. I promise." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over my mother's contact. I needed to hear her voice. But before I could dial, a notification popped up on the screen. It was a security alert from my banking app. My stomach clenched. I knew Mark had drained the joint accounts, but I still had my personal credit card, with a small emergency limit I kept for myself. I opened the app, my heart pounding. A single line of text made the world go gray. Account frozen due to suspected fraudulent activity reported by the primary account holder. The primary account holder, Mark. He was on the family plan. He hadn't just taken our money. He had cut off my last lifeline. He was trying to financially obliterate me to leave me with absolutely nothing. $500 in cash was all I had to my name. And just then, as if the universe had a sick sense of timing, another notification appeared. This one was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely open it. The message contained a single, grainy photo. It was of me, standing on the sidewalk with my children and our pile of bags. It had been taken from an upstairs window of my neighbor's house across the street. Beneath the photo was a short, chilling text. "Just so you never forget what you look like when you're garbage. Enjoy your new life. Brenda sends her regards." The image on my phone screen burned itself into my retinas. It was a picture of utter desolation. Me, wild-eyed and disheveled, clutching Maya. Leo standing beside me, his small shoulders slumped. A picture of confusion and fear. Our life's possessions in a pathetic heap on the curb. And the text, "Brenda sends her regards." It wasn't enough for her to win. She had to document my humiliation. She had to rub salt in the wound, a wound so deep I wasn't sure it would ever heal. The cruelty was so profound, so bottomless it felt almost surreal. I felt a wave of blackness creep into the edges of my vision. "Sarah? What is it?" David's voice cut through the fog. I couldn't speak. I just handed him the phone. He glanced at it while keeping his eyes on the road, and a string of curses escaped his lips, low and vicious. "That witch," he growled. "She got a neighbor to do her dirty work. I swear to God, Sarah, I'm gonna—" "Don't," I whispered, the words scraping my raw throat. "Don't. It's what they want. They want a reaction. They want to know they've broken me." A strange, cold clarity was settling over me, pushing back the shock. This wasn't just a messy divorce. This was a war. And Mark and Brenda had just launched a scorched earth campaign, freezing my credit card, sending that photo. They weren't just ending a marriage. They were trying to annihilate me, to erase my confidence, my stability, my very identity. They wanted me to be that woman in the photo forever, helpless, pathetic, and defeated. I took a deep, shuddering breath and straightened my shoulders. "Delete it, David," I said, my voice firmer now. "Delete the picture and block the number." He glanced at me, surprised by the steel in my tone, but he did as I asked. I wouldn't let that be the defining image of this day. I wouldn't let it be the memory that haunted my children. When we arrived at my mother's small, cozy house, she was waiting on the porch, her face etched with worry. The moment I stepped out of the car, she enveloped me in a hug that felt like coming home. I buried my face in her shoulder and finally allowed myself to break, the sobs I'd been holding back racking my entire body. She just held me, murmuring soothing words, stroking my hair like she did when I was a little girl. David quickly and quietly got the kids inside, distracting them with promises of juice boxes and cartoons, shielding them from the full force of my breakdown. After a few minutes, my tears subsided, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. We went inside, and my mom sat me down at her kitchen table with a steaming mug of tea. The contrast between this warm, loving space and the cold, sterile kitchen I'd left behind was staggering. Here the walls were covered in framed photos of me and David, of Leo and Maya. We weren't a liability here. We were loved. "He's a monster, Carol," I said, my voice hoarse. "A complete monster. I never really saw it. I saw flashes, but I always made excuses." "It's not your fault, honey," she said, her hand covering mine. "Men like that, they're chameleons. They show you exactly what you want to see until they don't need you anymore. And his mother, Brenda has been poisoning him against you since the day you met. I saw it. I just hoped he was strong enough to resist it." We spent the next hour piecing together a plan. David, who was a paralegal, was already on his laptop researching the top divorce lawyers in the city. "He can't just throw you out like that, Sarah," he insisted. "The house is marital property regardless of what he tricked you into signing. He can't freeze your credit card without cause. This is financial abuse, clear and simple. He's going to pay for this." His confidence was a small spark of light in my darkness, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. Mark was wealthy, ruthless, and had his mother's endless resources and malice backing him up. They would fight dirty. The photo was proof of that. My $500 felt like pebbles against the mountain of legal fees I was about to face. That evening, after settling the kids into the spare bedroom, I felt a desperate need to do something, to reclaim some small piece of my life. I remembered my laptop, which I'd managed to grab. Mark was meticulous about technology, but arrogant. He'd set up all our family accounts utilities, streaming services, our shared cloud storage where all our photos were backed up. And he'd used the same password pattern for everything, a pattern I knew well. With a trembling heart, I opened my laptop and navigated to the cloud login page. I typed in the familiar email address and then the password. My breath hitched. Access granted. A tidal wave of digital memories flooded the screen. 10 years of my life. Pictures of our wedding, Leo's first steps, Maya's first birthday, family vacations, everything. He'd kicked me out of the house, but he'd forgotten to kick me out of our shared history. I immediately started downloading everything, every photo, every video, onto an external hard drive David had given me. My hands flew across the keyboard, a frantic race against time. He could realize his mistake at any moment and change the password, locking me out forever. As the files transferred, I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. It was simply labeled Finances Private. My curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on it. The folder was password protected. My heart sank. Of course it was. But then I tried the same password pattern, with a slight variation he often used for more sensitive accounts. A variation involving his mother's birthday, a second of loading, and then the folder opened. It was a treasure trove. Scanned bank statements, investment portfolios, tax documents going back years. It was all there. A complete, unvarnished picture of Mark's financial world, a world he had always been secretive about, telling me not to worry my pretty little head with the details. I scrolled through the files, my eyes widening. The numbers were far bigger than I had ever imagined. He hadn't just been successful, he had been hiding the true extent of his wealth from me for years. There were offshore accounts, hidden assets, undeclared bonuses. He had systematically lied to me, creating a separate, secret financial life while I was at home clipping coupons and trying to stick to a budget he controlled. He wasn't just protecting his assets this morning, he was hiding them. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the file list was a subfolder named Brenda Trust. Inside was a single, heavily notarized legal document. I opened it. The legal jargon was dense, but the gist of it was terrifyingly clear. It was an agreement between Mark and his mother, signed less than a week after Leo was born. In it, Mark agreed to place a significant portion of his income and assets into a trust controlled entirely by Brenda. But there was a clause, a shocking, monstrous clause that made me feel sick to my stomach. The trust would only revert to Mark's full control under one of two conditions: my death or the complete and total dissolution of our marriage, with me receiving no more than a predetermined, insultingly small settlement. And the kicker? The document explicitly stated that any children from our marriage would have absolutely no claim or access to the trust's funds, ever. His mother hadn't just been poisoning him against me. She had financially neutered him from the very beginning, ensuring she held the purse strings and the power, and that his own children would be cut off if he ever left me. This wasn't a recent plan. This had been their endgame for 7 long years. It was a trap, and I had been living in it all this time without ever knowing the bars were there. The words on the screen swam before my eyes: my death, or the dissolution of our marriage. It wasn't a legal document. It was a contract for my erasure, drafted and signed when I was at my most vulnerable, recovering from childbirth and blissfully unaware of the viper's nest I had married into. For 7 years, Brenda had held this sword over our marriage. For 7 years, Mark had willingly played the part of her puppet, living a lie, knowing that his path to true financial freedom was paved over the ruins of his family. The cruelty of it, the sheer, breathtaking psychopathy, was beyond anything I could have imagined. They hadn't just planned for divorce, they had provisions for my death. My blood, which had been running cold with shock, began to boil with a rage so pure and hot it felt like it could melt steel. The photo, the frozen credit card, the cigar lounge, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just Mark being an arrogant jerk, and it wasn't just Brenda being a meddling mother-in-law. This was a long con. They were a team, a financial predator, and his handler, and my children and I were just collateral damage in their twisted game. "David," I called out, my voice tight and strange. He rushed into the room, my mom close behind him. "You need to see this. You both do." I turned the laptop around. I watched their faces as they read. David's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief and finally settled into a mask of grim, murderous fury. My mother simply put a hand over her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. That woman," she whispered. "She's evil. She's truly evil." "It's more than evil, Mom. It's a conspiracy to commit fraud," David said, his voice dangerously quiet. He pointed at the screen. "He's been hiding marital assets in a fraudulent trust controlled by his mother. He's lied on every single tax return they've filed as a married couple. He didn't just kick you out, Sarah. He's committed multiple felonies. He thinks he's untouchable, but he's just handed you the gun to shoot his entire world down." The plan was no longer just about getting a fair settlement in a divorce. This was about justice. This was about exposing them for the criminals they were. We spent the rest of the night working with a feverish intensity. David, using his paralegal expertise, guided me. We didn't just download the files. We documented everything. We took screenshots of the file directories, the access logs, the metadata. We created a digital paper trail that would prove I had accessed this information from my mother's IP address on this specific date, after I had been illegally thrown out of my home. We were building a case, not just for family court, but potentially for the IRS. The next morning, armed with a USB drive containing Mark and Brenda's darkest secrets, I walked into the office of Eleanor Vance, the most feared divorce attorney in the state. She was known as the Shark, a woman who didn't just win cases, she annihilated her opponents. She was expensive, impossibly so, but David had called in a favor with a former boss just to get me a preliminary consultation. Eleanor Vance was an imposing woman in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. I sat across the vast mahogany desk in her office, feeling small and overwhelmed. I told her everything: the phone call, the packed bags, the frozen account, the horrifying photo. She listened patiently, her face an unreadable mask, making a few notes on a legal pad. I could see the skepticism in her eyes, the look of a lawyer who had heard 1,000 sob stories from scorned women. "It's a classic case of narcissistic financial abuse, Mrs. Peterson," she said when I finished, her tone professional but cool. "Ugly, but not uncommon. He has the money and the power. He's hidden his assets. It will be a long, brutal, uphill battle to get you what you're owed." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "But he made a mistake. A very, very big mistake." I slid the USB drive across the polished desk. He forgot to change the password to our cloud server. Eleanor raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She plugged the drive into her computer, and I guided her to the Finances private folder, and then to the Brenda Trust document. As she read, the mask of professional detachment began to crack. Her sharp eyes widened slightly. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a shark that has just scented blood in the water. She read the entire document, then went back and read the clause about me and the children again. She leaned back in her leather chair, tapping a long, manicured finger on her desk. "Mr. Peterson and his mother," she said, her voice now a purr of deadly satisfaction, "are not just cruel. They're amateurs. This document isn't just a smoking gun, Mrs. Peterson. It's a signed confession wrapped around a nuclear bomb." She looked me straight in the eye. "Forget the uphill battle. We're going to level the entire mountain. You're not going to just get a settlement. You're going to get everything. And I'm going to take your case pro bono for a percentage of the final judgment. It will be my distinct pleasure to personally bankrupt your husband and his mother." For the first time in 48 hours, I felt a flicker of hope ignite into a flame. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that this powerful woman believed me. She saw the truth, and she was going to help me fight. The first step was to get a temporary restraining order and an emergency custody and support order. Eleanor's team worked like a well-oiled machine. Within a day, we were in front of a judge. Mark didn't even bother to show up, sending a junior lawyer from his corporate firm instead, a clear sign of his arrogance. The lawyer argued that I was unstable and had left the marital home voluntarily. Then Eleanor presented our evidence, the text message with the humiliating photo, the statement showing my frozen credit card, and a sworn affidavit from my brother about what he had witnessed. The judge's face grew darker with each piece of evidence. He immediately granted the restraining order, gave me sole temporary custody of the children, and ordered Mark to pay a significant amount of monthly child and spousal support effective immediately. He also ordered Mark to immediately unfreeze all my financial accounts. We had won the first battle. That evening, I was at my mom's house, watching the kids sleep. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. A fierce, protective love washed over me. I would do anything to keep them safe, to give them the life they deserved. My phone buzzed. It was an email from an unknown address. My heart lurched, thinking it was another threat from Brenda, but the sender name was just a single initial. My hands trembled as I opened it. The email was short and cryptic. "I know what he did. I know what he's planning. He's going to try to take the children. He's working with someone to create a fake Child Protective Services report against you. He told me everything. I can't let him do this. I have proof. Meet me." It was followed by a time and the address of a quiet coffee shop across town for the next morning. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who is Jay? And then a horrifying realization dawned on me. The light, musical laughter I had heard through the study door. The woman on the phone with Mark, his mistress. She was reaching out to me. The email felt like a trap. My first instinct was to delete it, to show it to David and Eleanor, to let them handle it. Mark and Brenda were capable of anything. This could easily be a setup, a way to lure me into a public place, to create a scene, to fabricate more lies. But the words on the screen held a chilling ring of truth. He's going to try to take the children. It was their next logical move. Having failed to crush me financially, they would now try to destroy me as a mother. A fake CPS report was exactly the kind of vile, underhanded tactic Brenda would orchestrate. The thought of my children being subjected to that, of having strangers question them, of having our already fragile world turned upside down again, was more terrifying than any threat to myself. I sat in the dark, the glow of the phone illuminating my face, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. What if she was telling the truth? What if this woman, this Jay, was my only way of getting ahead of their next attack? She had been his confidant. She would know his plans, his weaknesses. She was a risk, a massive, unpredictable one, but she could also be an invaluable, if unwilling, ally. I made a decision. I would go. But I wouldn't go in blind. The next morning I told my mom I was meeting a friend. I called David and told him the truth. He was furious. "No way, Sarah. It's a trap. I'm coming with you." "No, David," I insisted. "If they see you, she'll never show. I have to do this alone." "But I won't be alone." We came up with a plan. He would park across the street from the coffee shop. I would activate the voice recorder on my phone and place it in my pocket the moment I sat down. I would also share my live location with him. If I wasn't out in exactly 30 minutes, or if I texted him a pre-arranged code word, sunflower, Maya's favorite, he was to call the police and then come in. Walking into the Steaming Bean coffee shop felt like stepping into an arena. My nerves were stretched taut. I scanned the room, my eyes flitting over the handful of patrons. In a quiet booth in the back corner, a woman sat alone, staring into a latte. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with sleek dark hair and an expensive-looking silk blouse. She looked up as I approached, and her eyes, nervous and shadowed with guilt, met mine. It was her. "Sarah?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. I nodded, sliding into the booth opposite her. I didn't say anything. I just waited, letting the silence hang between us. My hand was in my pocket, my thumb resting on the side of my phone, ready to hit the emergency call button. "Thank you for coming," she finally said, pushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "My name is Jessica." Jessica. The name was so simple, so normal. It was hard to reconcile this nervous young woman with the faceless mistress who had laughed on the phone while my life was being dismantled. "Why did you contact me?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. I wasn't here to make friends. She winced at my tone. "Look, I know what you must think of me, and you're not wrong. I was stupid." Mark can be very charming, very persuasive. He painted a picture of a loveless marriage, of a wife who didn't appreciate him. He told me you were cold, distant. She had the decency to look ashamed. I believed him until that day. "What happened that day?" I pressed, my patience wearing thin. "When he called me, after he'd kicked you out," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "He was so triumphant, giddy. He described what he'd done, how he'd packed your bags, how his mother was coming over to purge the house of you. He laughed, Sarah. He laughed about it. And it wasn't the laugh of a man escaping a bad marriage. It was the laugh of a predator who had just made a kill. It was cruel. And then he told me about the plan for the CPS report." She took a shaky sip of her latte. "Brenda has a friend who works at the agency. They were going to file an anonymous tip, claim you were unstable, that there was substance abuse, neglect. They were going to use the fight you had the night before as evidence of your violent tendencies. Mark was coaching me on what to say if I was ever questioned, how I should describe you as an unfit mother. He wanted me to be a part of it. He wanted me to help him take your children away from you." A cold dread washed over me, so intense it made me feel nauseous. They had it all planned out, every disgusting detail. They would have buried me in lies. "Why are you telling me this, Jessica?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What's in it for you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm not a monster," she said, her voice cracking. "I may have been a fool, but I'm not evil. I can't be a part of that. I can't help a man destroy the mother of his children. What he's doing to you, to them, it's wrong. And I realized, if he can do this to you, the woman he built a life with, what would he do to me when he got tired of me?" She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out her phone. "He's arrogant. He thinks everyone is as corruptible as he is. He texted me. He put his plans in writing." She turned the phone around and showed me the screen. There it was, in black and white. A string of text messages from Mark outlining the entire CPS scheme, names, dates, the specific lies they were going to tell. He had even texted her a photo of a small bag of white powder with the message, "So easy to plant in her car, they'll never know." My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't just going to lie, he was going to plant drugs on me. He would have let me go to jail, lose my children forever, just to win. The absolute, bottomless evil of it was staggering. "Will you testify?" I asked, my voice trembling with the enormity of what I was seeing. "Will you show this to my lawyer?" Jessica bit her lip, her eyes darting towards the door. "I'm scared, Sarah. He's a powerful man. His mother is terrifying. If they find out I talked to you, they're trying to put me in jail and take my children based on planted evidence," I said, leaning forward, my voice low and intense. "They are not going to stop. You helped create this mess, Jessica. The least you can do is help me protect my kids from the monster you were sleeping with." Her face crumbled. She knew I was right. "Okay," she whispered, nodding. "Okay, I'll help you. I'll forward these texts to you. I'll do whatever your lawyer needs." She quickly sent the messages and then stood up, gathering her things. "I have to go. I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything." She turned and practically fled from the coffee shop. I sat there for a long moment, the voice recorder still running in my pocket, Jessica's forwarded texts now glowing on my phone screen. This was it. This was the nail for Mark's coffin. This went beyond fraud. This was a criminal conspiracy. I forwarded everything to Eleanor and David with a simple message. He was going to plant drugs on me. We have proof. A moment later, Eleanor called. "Stay where you are," she said, her voice like ice. "I'm sending this to the district attorney's office. This is no longer a divorce case. This is a criminal investigation. A detective will meet you at my office in 1 hour. The line went dead. My world was spinning. The DA? Detectives? It was escalating faster than I could comprehend. As I sat there, trying to process everything, a news alert popped up on my phone from a local business journal. The headline made my blood freeze. Local tech CEO Mark Peterson announces shocking merger with global conglomerate, cites recent personal freedom for career-defining move. Below it was a picture of Mark, standing on a stage at a press conference, beaming, shaking hands with some anonymous executive. He looked triumphant, untouchable. He was celebrating his newfound freedom on a public stage, while in a quiet coffee shop across town, the evidence that would bring his entire world crashing down had just landed in my hands, and he had no idea. The news alert was the final piece of the puzzle, the merger. That's what this had all been about. It wasn't just about Brenda's control or Jessica's allure. It was about money, power, and perception on a scale I hadn't even considered. A publicly traded global conglomerate wouldn't want a CEO with a messy, expensive divorce hanging over his head. They'd want the clean, unencumbered visionary. The family man image had served its purpose while he was climbing the ladder. But now, at the summit, he needed a new narrative. The brilliant, laser-focused executive, freed from domestic dead weight. I wasn't just a liability to his finances, I was a liability to his brand. My erasure was a prerequisite for the biggest deal of his life. Meeting with Detective Miller was a surreal experience. He was a kind, serious man who listened to my story with an unwavering focus, his expression growing more grim as I laid out the evidence. The trust document, the financial records, the recording of my meeting with Jessica, and the damning text messages. When he saw the picture of the drugs Mark intended to plant, he excused himself from the room for a moment. When he returned, his entire demeanor had shifted. He was no longer just investigating a potential crime. He was on a hunt. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice firm, "what you and your children have endured is horrific. I want to assure you we are taking this with the utmost seriousness. With this evidence, we have more than enough to proceed." The wheels of justice, once they started turning, moved with shocking speed. Eleanor Vance, armed with the criminal investigation, went back to the family court judge. She filed an emergency motion painting, a picture of Mark and Brenda's conspiracy so vile, so meticulously documented, that the judge's reaction was palpable, even in the dry legal filings. He immediately issued a new order, stripping Mark of all visitation rights, pending the outcome of the criminal case, and putting a temporary freeze on all his known assets, including the anticipated payout from the merger, to prevent him from hiding any more money. The shark had drawn blood, and now the entire legal system was circling. The fallout was spectacular. The district attorney, sensing a high-profile case, moved quickly. Warrants were issued. The day it all came crashing down, I was at my mother's house helping Leo with a school project. My phone buzzed with a message from David. It was a link to a local news site. The headline read, "Prominent tech CEO Mark Peterson and mother Brenda Peterson arrested in shocking conspiracy case." The article detailed their arrests. Mark pulled from his glass-walled corner office in the middle of the workday. Brenda taken from her pristine home in handcuffs, looking bewildered and enraged. They were charged with multiple felonies: conspiracy to commit perjury, attempted fabrication of evidence, and a slew of financial crimes related to the fraudulent trust. The story was the lead on every local news channel that night. The triumphant photo of Mark shaking hands at the merger announcement was now plastered next to a grim-faced mugshot. The global conglomerate, terrified of the PR nightmare, immediately announced the merger was indefinitely suspended pending an internal review. ORTD, Mark's career-defining move had imploded in the most public way imaginable. The legal battle that followed was brutal, but I was no longer fighting it alone. I was insulated by Eleanor, David, and the full weight of the DA's office. Jessica, granted immunity, became the state's star witness. Her testimony detailing Mark's gleeful plotting was devastating. The digital trail I had uncovered was irrefutable. Mark and Brenda's high-priced lawyers tried to paint me as a vengeful, scorned wife, but the evidence was simply too overwhelming. They were buried under the weight of their own arrogance. In the end, they both took plea deals to avoid a longer, more humiliating trial, and the even longer prison sentences they would have undoubtedly received. Brenda, the architect of so much misery, was sentenced to 2 years in a state prison for her role in the conspiracy and fraud. The thought of that cold, cruel woman in a prison jumpsuit brought me no joy, only a quiet, somber sense of justice. Mark's sentence was harsher. He got 5 years for his more direct role in the plot to frame me. He was also professionally and financially ruined. The SEC launched its own investigation, and he was forced to pay millions in fines. My divorce settlement, negotiated by Eleanor from a position of absolute power, was more than I could have ever dreamed. I wasn't just given the house. I was given full ownership of all their non-frozen assets as restitution. I walked away with enough to ensure that my children would never have to worry about anything, ever again. The first thing I did was sell the house. I couldn't stand to live in a place with so many ghosts. I bought a beautiful, smaller home in a new neighborhood, closer to my mom and David. It had a big backyard for the kids to play in, and a bright, sunny room that I turned into my own home office. I went back to school online and finished the degree I'd abandoned for Mark, reigniting my passion for graphic design. I started my own small freelance business, and for the first time in over a decade, I felt the thrill of my own success, the pride of earning something that was mine and mine alone. Life became quiet and beautifully normal. Our days were filled with school runs, play dates, homework, and bedtime stories, not with passive-aggressive dinners and walking on eggshells. Leo and Maya thrived. Away from the toxic tension of their father and grandmother, they blossomed into happy, secure children. They saw a therapist for a while to help them process everything, and slowly the fear and confusion were replaced by the simple joys of being kids. One sunny afternoon, about a year after everything had settled, I was in the backyard watching Leo teach Maya how to swing on the new swing set. My mother was sitting beside me, sipping iced tea. "You know," she said quietly, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful to them." I looked at her, confused. Grateful? She smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "They showed you who they were, and in doing so, they showed you who you are. A fighter, a survivor, an incredible mother. They tried to break you, Sarah, but they only succeeded in making you unbreakable. Look at this," she said, gesturing to the kids, to our happy little world. "This is what victory looks like." She was right. My victory wasn't the money or the house. It wasn't even seeing Mark and Brenda get what they deserved. My victory was the sound of my children's laughter echoing in our own, safe backyard. It was the quiet confidence I now felt in myself, the freedom of a life lived on my own terms. Mark had pompously told my mother he had kicked me and the kids out, but what he'd really done was kick us out of a prison I didn't even know I was in. He'd kicked us out into the light and into a future that was, finally and completely, our own.